We have a lot of news to talk about tonight, including another big day on the waiver wire. Some very interesting names need to pass through waivers to be assigned to the American Hockey League affiliate. We've seen another PTO be turned into a professional contract. We have some injury updates and some trade rumors concerning the Montreal Canadiens, the future of Mark Bergevin at the head of the Canadiens as GM, and will the Brady Tkachuk situation end up resulting in a trade? We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to talk about here today. Let's kick things off with a few updates when it comes to injuries and signings. First up on the injury note, we saw yesterday Capitals captain Ovechkin be injured in a preseason game. Didn't look very good. I'm not really sure what the update is on him here as of the recording of this video, but certainly a prime example of why players need to be careful in the preseason and why sometimes the preseason can be counterproductive. It's nice to kind of get everything warmed up and ready to go, but then you risk these things happening. So we certainly hope that situation like this isn't going to cause Ovi to miss the start of the year. Of course, he's starting a new contract. He's trying to chase Wayne Gretzky's record for most goals. I mean, obviously, it doesn't look like it's going to be too serious, I wouldn't think, but still, you'd hate to see injury, really deter that. When it comes to Minnesota Wild youngster Matthew Boldy, we did get further clarification on his status. His ankle injury is going to keep him out of the lineup for about 4 to 6 weeks. So obviously he'll start the year as a non-roster injured player. They did demote some other guys as well, including youngsters like Rossi and Beckman. So they're all going to go down. Of course, picking up Pitlick on waivers the other day kind of changed the dynamic there, but the Wild will certainly have a lot of interesting youngsters starting in the AHL, and certainly will have a very competitive team to keep an eye on down there. Would be my anticipation. Now, a few other PTOs have turned into contracts. First up, the New Jersey Devils have signed forward Freddie Gauthier to a one-year deal. He gets a two-way contract, though. It's valued at $800,000 at the NHL level, $125,000 at the American Hockey League level. Make that $175,000. So Freddie Gauthier continues on with his NHL career. Of course, a long time Maple Leaf, and ever since leaving Toronto, it's kind of bounced around here a little bit. And then we saw the real deal James Neal get another contract, this time with the St. Louis Blues after having a pretty good training camp in preseason. He gets a one-year deal at $750,000, which is certainly kind of forcing the Blues to make some other tough decisions, including some players on waivers here that we're going to talk about here momentarily. But the veteran Neal sticks with the Blues after having a strong showing, and we'll get another chance here at life to continue in the NHL. Now, as I mentioned, on to today's waiver wire news. Now, we didn't have any waiver claims from yesterday, so all the players we talked about, and there were some interesting names there as well. Everybody passed through waivers without there being a claim, but I'm not so sure that's going to happen with this group of players. There are some interesting names out there. We'll have to see. Obviously, players' contracts will play a role here as well. Teams, as much as they might like a player, they may not like the contract. It might come with too much term, etc. Sometimes that's how teams decide who to put through when they need to make roster cuts because they're confident they won't get picked up. But today we have in Boston defenseman John Moore and forward Chris Wagner. Now, Moore is not too shocking. A little bit surprised on Chris Wagner, but obviously they do have some younger players there battling for spots within that bottom six. They've got Trent Frederick. They have Jack Studnicka. I think Curtis Lazar, I believe, is injured right now, but he's certainly been a pretty good player for them since he was acquired late last year as well. And Wagner did not really play a regular spot and certainly had his playing time and being in the lineup reduced later into last year. So that continues, and we'll see. Wouldn't be shocking if he is picked up. But like I said, his contract might be what stops and prevents that from happening. We'll have to wait and see. Detroit, Calvin Pickard, goaltender, is on waivers. I would think he probably clears, but anybody looking for depth goaltending has an option there. The New York Islanders have placed defenseman Thomas Hickey and Richard Panik, who of course they acquired from the Detroit Red Wings in the Nick Leddy trade. Not a huge shocker there. One player I thought might have been moved on from the Islanders by now, be either via trade or through this would have been Komarov, but they continue to have the Leo Love there, so he stays. Now, Panik, for example, between the salary that was retained from the Red Wings in that trade, and if they're able to put him in the minors if he clears, then they'll actually only be ending up with a $250,000 cap hit for the remainder of his contract, because he'll have $1.1 million buried in the minors plus what Detroit retained. So that'll kind of make things a little bit easier. That means from the Leddy trade, it doesn't leave a whole lot left counting against their salary cap, which was the main purpose of that deal. So we'll see what happens there. Panik signed for this year and next year. So I would think, as much as some teams might have a small amount of interest, that probably doesn't happen. Pittsburgh has Anthony Angelo on waivers. The Sharks have Dylan Gambrell. That's a little bit surprising as well. I really thought he would be nailed down to be their number 3 or 4 center by now, especially where they're not an overly deep team at the moment. I'm a little surprised. Obviously, that tells me that they were not overly happy with his training camp, which of course I didn't get to see a ton of, so I'm not really sure how Gambrell looked, but he's still young and is still a player that could be a bottom 6 forward in my opinion. So it wouldn't be shocking if a team took a flyer on him. And the rest of them here to me are the more likely ones to get claimed. The St. Louis Blues have placed newly acquired young centerman Logan Brown on waivers and Mackenzie McEachern. Now, Logan Brown, who was just acquired via trade not that long ago, a couple weeks ago from the Ottawa Senators, as training camps opened up for Zach Stanford, obviously didn't have a great showing. I know there were some Ottawa fans that were really upset that he was moved. Of course, he's been in the system for like 4 or 5 years and really had a lot of time injured. He seems like he's prone to that, unfortunately. And at the same time, he just has not developed into being that top big, 6'6" dominant center that they thought they were drafting. He goes to St. Louis. They gave up assets to get him, and now they're not even sure they want to keep him. So obviously that's probably upsetting for him, because St. Louis is where he's from. It's a hometown, homecoming, I guess you could call it. So we'll see if Logan Brown gets picked up or not. I know the Sens were in trade talks for quite a while, but wouldn't be shocking if a team took a flyer on a huge, 6'6" centerman that does have some skill and does get around the ice pretty well. So we'll see where that goes. The signing of James Neal definitely had an impact on how many roster spots were available, though. Same goes for Mackenzie McEachern. Wouldn't be shocking if he was picked up. And again, James Neal signing impacts the number of spots there and has an impact on him as well. The Maple Leafs have Alex Biega. He probably clears, but then they have Curtis Gabriel. Now, Gabriel, I thought, had a pretty good preseason for the Leafs. Not afraid to drop the gloves. Can add you that physical element. Able to fight when need be. 6'4", slightly over 200 pounds. He's a tough customer. I'm a little bit surprised there, but if you look at their roster right now, they still have 13, 14 forwards there that it's hard to justify cutting over him. And so it's just because of the depth, but a lot of the other players that they've brought in also had good camps, like Michael Bunting and David Kampf, and even Adam Brooks has had a pretty good camp. Engvale's made it tough. There was a lot of rumors that Engvale was going to get traded as a way to make some room, and really, in my opinion, he's had a pretty good camp too. Like, they've made it tough on him. So unfortunately, Gabriel gets put through waivers. Hard to say what happens to him, but he's an interesting name. If teams want some size, physicality, a fourth line player, he does fit the bill, and he comes cheap. 1-year deal. So to me, they might lose him. And the Washington Capitals have defenseman Michael Kempny. So again, if teams are looking for an experienced veteran D, maybe they put in a claim. I don't know. There could be some other options more available in the coming days or via trade. So a lot of interesting names out there. Wouldn't be shocking at this time tomorrow, as we're doing the next video on this channel, that we're talking about a potential situation where there is at least 1, maybe 2 waiver claims. We'll have to see where things go on that front. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have some news and rumors concerning the Montreal Canadiens. Frank Saravalli of dailyfaceoff.com has made some interesting comments on the Habs in a recent podcast, talking about the requirement for the preseason. Now, preseason games are scheduled by the NHL teams themselves. The NHL does not have a central scheduling department that looks after all that. Now, there is a rule book about this that they expect teams to play a minimum of 6 preseason games. Now, apparently Montreal took it upon themselves to notify the NHL that the Carolina Hurricanes have not done that. They've only played 4 preseason games. Now, of course, we know this little rivalry between Montreal and Carolina is kind of getting to the point now where it's like a year old or more after the multiple offer sheets we've seen between Kotkaniemi, Sebastian Aho, and really, it's not that the NHL couldn't have, picked up on this, but, you probably don't have anybody really analyzing or looking that closely. You assume everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Montreal happened to notice it, and he says, according to what he's heard, that the Habs kind of ratted them out. So it's getting a little bit silly. I understand, to me, if I'm Carolina, I'd probably be okay playing 3 or 4 preseason games too. Like, you're getting a little bit much, in my opinion. You're risking injury. You're dragging things on too long. I don't think you need that many games to really know who's going to be on your team, make your cuts, etc. So, we'll see what happens. But according to the rule book, there really doesn't seem to be any real type of punishment or anything. Probably at worst they might get like a warning. I really don't know what's going to come from that. Probably nothing, but it is something that they are required to do. And Sarah Valley says the Habs were kind of ratting out the Hurricanes. So the little tit for tat rivalry between those two teams continue. When it comes to the Habs, they're also rumored to be looking for an experienced defenseman that they could pick up either through waivers or via trades. I'm not sure if they'll have any interest in Kempny or Moore or any of these guys that we looked at here today. I'm going to say maybe not. I'm not sure those contracts will fit the bill, but ultimately they're in a situation where they don't have Captain Shea Weber all year. Joel Edmondson is going to be out for about the first 3 weeks of the season. We saw Sammy Nico get concussed early on. If they have a situation where either Petrie or Sherratt gets hurt in the next 2-3 weeks, they're going to be in big trouble. The NHL insiders have been saying that there is quite a good possibility that they likely will try to add some more depth in that regard. Now, for right now, they could also go about keeping Caden Gooley, who's one of their top prospects around. Maybe, because he has looked pretty decent in the preseason. Certainly had his defensive moments too. But overall, I think it's been a very positive camp. They could keep him around, and they could actually play him, up to his 9 games before he can get sent back without the contract burning a year. So there is that possibility they could do that, but do they want to do that? Or would they rather get him back to junior sooner than later to get him settled in and get playing with his new team or his old team? And kind of get somebody else who can kind of fill that role just for the year. I'm not sure what they'll do, but there is rumors out there the Habs are scouring the D market, trying to see if they can pick up somebody that's going to not cost too much or on waivers or whatnot. And the other thing with Montreal I want to talk about here today as well is just want a little bit further talk about the future of Marc Bergevin. Of course, we've talked a bit about that a couple of times in the past week. And ultimately now the NHL insiders are all seem to be convinced as more time goes on. And now that we've learned that the negotiations for an extension for him are done with, basically, they're putting it on the shelf. They're not going to discuss this any further until the season is over. That pretty much just really ramps up the likelihood that he does not return. They've been talking about an extension for the better part of this year. So, that's several months now that this has been ongoing, as we know, and we're going to talk about Brady Tkachuk and how the longer you go without contracts and coming to a term and a resolution, that it just gets more likely that you're not going to, and you may part ways, right? So I'm not convinced at this point that Marc Bergevin 100% is gone. I don't think that's the case. But if they're not going to talk about it, it's really a lot of it's going to depend on how the year goes too, right? If things don't go well this year, maybe Jeff Molson decides maybe it's time for a change. Maybe we should just mutually part ways. Maybe they keep him on in a different capacity, something to that effect. But we all know Marc Bergevin has been there a long time. It's an extremely stressful job. It's a market that comes with tons of pressure. I think he's handled it relatively well, but you can tell the man has aged a lot during his run there. Maybe, a lot of people are convinced too that maybe it's time for him to do something else, that he really doesn't know that he wants to stay. But the fact that they're not going to be negotiating for quite some time, he's a lame duck GM. He's probably going to do everything he can this year to make sure this team has the best chance to win again, like if he can try to duplicate last year. But it is quite a likelihood, according to NHL insiders, that this is his last kick at the can here as GM of Montreal, and that he will most likely be vacating that post at the end of this season. And of course, that's a good segue, I think, into, players who might be parting ways. And I'm not really sure this is going to be the case, but I know Darren Dreger made a few comments on TSN radio, and a lot of people seem to be running with it. I think to some degree, some of it might be taken out of context, but still, the fact of the matter is this: Brady Tkachuk and the Ottawa Senators have not come to terms on a new contract. The longer this goes, it does impact a relationship, and it could lead to a trade, if not now, maybe down the road before this next contract expires. Essentially, the comments from Darren Dreger at TSN, he said if the Senators and Tkachuk cannot come to terms on a long-term deal, and right now it looks like Brady doesn't want that if they go on a bridge deal, if they sign a 3-year contract, he does not see Brady Tkachuk completing the contract, likely in year 2 or early in year 3 before it gets too far close to the end, that Tkachuk would be traded. That's what he said, because owner Eugene Melnyk does not want to get into another contract dispute. He's not going to let it go on right near the end. We know that Melnyk does not want to pay signing bonuses, but they're not the only team. And to me, I don't know, I understand where the sentiment comes from, but at the same time here, I don't quite completely understand why a bridge deal with Brady Tkachuk would be that bad. I can understand from his side of it why that might be best for him. It gives him a couple of things. One, it allows to see how the financial landscape of the NHL changes in the next few years. He can get a good salary now and then likely cash in much better in 3 years' time, because the salary cap is finally going to, expected to go up a tiny little bit between now and then probably in year 3 for now is when we're going to see a bigger jump, so there'll be more money available. He can then look to do a long-term deal and really cash in at that point. So financially, it makes more sense. Also, it gives him a chance to continue on with his team, which he apparently loves. He loves the city, loves his teammates, likes the fans. Everything is going well from that side of the business for him. So it allows him to continue to work with them to see what kind of winning formula they're putting together. Remaining youngsters like Josh Norris and Tim Stützle all sign longer-term deals as well. They get Batherson locked up. They get Chabot locked up. Can they get the other guys too? Keep this nucleus together and see how far they can come in the next couple of years. To me, it's not that big a deal. To me, if you do a 3-year deal, after 2 years, you start working on the next extension, get them signed for 7 or 8 years at that point. I don't understand why it's all doom and gloom here and why everybody assumes that if the contract ends up being that short, that he's all but gone. And there are some that think that they might have to end up trading him now, and I really don't see that happening. While Senators are not in a situation where they need to do that, they know going into this year, they're hoping to obviously make the playoffs. They're hoping to see some progress. Playoffs are not a guarantee. We know that going in. Everybody can to testify to the fact that they should be better, but will they be good enough to get in the playoffs? That's difficult to say. I'm not sure that Ottawa Senators fans or the franchise themselves should be completely disappointed and really think that it's a major setback if they don't get in this year. They have all kinds of salary cap space, and they have nothing but time. Obviously, they want to get Tkachuk in the lineup as soon as possible. He's a huge part of that team. I honestly think right now the main posturing here is that they really wanted to name him captain, and it looks like and sounds like that owner Eugene Melnyk only wanted to do that if he was going to sign long term. He's made the comment numerous times that you're not going to name a captain unless they're signed to a long-term contract. And to me, they wanted to do that. Brady doesn't seem to want the long-term contract, and they're just trying to hold out here and convince him to see things their way. End of the day, the Tkachuk family and their agent, Craig Oster, who has represented many other former Senators who have left town, including Mark Stone and Erik Karlsson and others, they need to show them and prove to them hardcore more than most other teams and franchises what they're going to do and where things are heading to convince them to do those long-term deals. In my opinion, that's just the way it is, and we'll see where things go. But at this point, I don't foresee a Tkachuk trade happening imminently, but it could happen down the road because we know what they're like from the family side of it. If things are not looking promising and they're not willing to pay Brady what they feel he deserves, then they will eventually get to that point. But I don't think we're anywhere near that now, and I think the Dreger comments were maybe a little bit overblown, but we will see. At this point, until he's signed, I wouldn't completely rule out anything because owner Eugene Melnyk is a bit erratic, and you just never know what kind of crazy thing he might come up with next and not want to pay his players, because unfortunately that's the history. Until you see different, it's hard to get that out of your head. But we've seen it with Colin White, we've seen it with Thomas Chabot, we've seen it with Drake Batherson. So maybe it's not all on the team. So we'll see where things go. Hopefully they can come to terms with Tkachuk in the near future. But at this point, I'm not convinced a trade is going to happen, today, tomorrow, anytime soon as well. But could it happen down the road? I can see it if things don't change and they don't give him what he wants on his contract. But let me know what you think down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.